Sorry. Okay, here we go. All right. Hey guys, welcome back to I know we're early today. It's usually 8 o'clock, but I've gone out of my way. I'm on location. I'm here with John Ruddick, contributor to Sky News and The Spectator.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Yes. Among other things. So we're going to talk about a fair few topics today. The election 2024. We're going to talk about what your thoughts on conservatism at large are here in the West or here in Australia. But let's start with how you got into what you're doing and why you do what you do.
Well, look, I mean, a couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Make the Liberal Party Great Again. And now that was a book which was an important book. And it was about, it does have I guess, a sexy title that got people's attention.
Yeah.
Okay, but it was a book that was a bit of a technical manual on how to reform the internal rules of the Liberal Party. So this is not a book for, you know, mainstream Australians to read. This is really for people who are political activists. Now, it was calling for, look, the Liberal Party, everybody thinks the Liberal Party was started by Robert Menzies in 1944.
Oh, okay. So to educate us, tell us.
Well, look, the truth is there has been very consistently since the 1880s a right-of-centre party in this country. Now, it went through various name changes up until Menzies came along. And Menzies in the 1940s, so like it was, well, at the time of Federation in 1901, there was two non-Labor parties. There was the Free Trader Party and there was the Protectionist Party. They merged about 10 years later. They became the Commonwealth Liberal Party, then they became the Nationalist Party, then they became the United Australia Party. But the truth, and then Robert Menzies came along and he made it a national party in that previously they were very, very much a state-focused party. And he created this thing that the previous parties never had, which was a federal executive.
Okay.
But the truth is the party's been around since the 19th century. And the party's rules have barely changed since the 19th century. And those rules basically say that only a small group of people get to have any say about the important decisions of the political party. Now, the most important decisions of a party organisation is who's going to be the candidate on election day.
Yes.
Who's going to wear the badge Liberal, because there's a hell of a lot of Aussies out there which will just blindly vote Liberal. Okay, so the big fight within the party is who's going to be the Liberal candidate, and my book was proposing a better way to select candidates.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically saying we should do what the United States does, which was we should have a primary election. So I live in the federal seat of North Sydney, in which about
people might try to stalk you. No, okay.
about 120,000 voters live in the federal seat of North Sydney, like they do in most seats. Now, at the current federal member, Trent Zimmerman, he won a pre-selection where only about 98 local Liberal Party members had a say. And of course, Trent was helpful in the So now
the internet stopped. But it seems that, can you guys still see us? Are we still on air? Oh, it's fine. Never mind. Let's got a few more. All right, we'll just keep going.
So there would be, in the seat of North Sydney, there would be about 600 people who are financial members of the Liberal Party.
Okay.
So one option is to let all 600 of those people have a vote, which would obviously be a step forward. But the best way to do it is to invite the members of the public who are not members of the Liberal Party, but who are keen Liberal Party supporters, of which there would be 20 or 30,000 people. We have, let's say we have a dozen candidates stand up and say, I'd like to be the candidate at the next federal election for the Liberal Party. And then we invite the Liberal Party voting public to come out and vote for who they think would be the best. Now, if you have, let's say we have 10,000 people voting and they're not members of the Liberal Party, they're really just going to be voting for what they think or who they think is the best person. Someone who's got the right policy ideas and, of course, somebody who's got some popularity. So this is what we need to do. Now, what happens at the moment is that most of the members of the Parliamentary Liberal Party at the state and federal levels are people who have got in through these dodgy factional deals. They haven't had to demonstrate that they've got a great interest in policy, and they're just treating politics as though it's a career. So
yes, career politicians, it's a huge issue.
Correct.
For the public, yeah.
Yes.
Well, for the public that understands that, yeah.
So the number one thing in the book was that we should have the federal parliamentary leader should be elected by the entire party members. So I'd say, look, you've got to pay your $50 or whatever it is a year to become a member of the Liberal Party. And then when there is a leadership ballot on, it's not 100 people in the party room who half of those people in the party room are only voting for the candidate who's going to give them a promotion off the back bench. Okay. Now, if we have 200,000 people across there, citizens who are sincere Liberal Party supporters who want to help the party and there's nothing in it for them, but they're going to vote for who they think is going to be the best candidate, then I believe that we're going to get prime ministers and opposition leaders who very much are committed to good policy, which we don't have at the moment.
Okay. So is it a safe title to say you're a Liberal Party reformer because of this book?
Well,
which
democratic reformer, yes. Look,
democratic reformer.
These things take time. We have made, we've made step forwards, good positive step forwards in New South Wales. But I mean, you know, these, you know, I intend to keep fighting this fight until we get it. That if that takes us 10 years, then that's what we're prepared to do.
My only contention, I suppose, with it is that you said earlier that the Liberal Party stance hasn't changed very much. But I mean, the Liberal Party represents the alleged conservatism of this country. I did a video on this where I said I'm no longer a conservative based on these reasons. The Conservative Party introduced abortion. The Conservative Party introduced gay marriage. The Conservative Party did all that. So they're not conserving.
Talking about in the UK or Australia?
Australia.
Right.
They're not conserving. Conserve means to maintain, to uphold. That has not been done. I'm a Christian. I don't hate progressiveness necessarily, but I don't like that now gays were able to marry before. Civil unions did everything that the now gay marriage does. I don't like the idea of abortion. I think children in the womb I think it should be very difficult. It should be made very difficult. It should be, but it's the Liberal Party, the party that you're trying to change from the inside, that did that. How do you respond to that?
Well, look, when I say the party hasn't changed, it hasn't changed since the 19th century, not in terms of its ideas and policies.
Oh, I thought that's what you meant.
In terms of how it selects candidates.
Sorry. Okay.
But what has happened now is the party is it's run by apparatchiks. One of the few good inventions of the Soviet Union was the term apparatchik, which basically means somebody that's got nothing else in their life or their career than politics, people who are financially dependent upon the political system. Now, these are not people we want in Parliament. No. The truth is, we really want people who are typically over the age of 50 in Parliament. Because once you get to 50, you have lived a lot of life, you've become pretty wise, you've seen a lot of things, you've met a lot of different people, good and bad, you've seen a lot of failed political ideas and so forth, and successful ones. And people just become wise. Now, this is why in all ancient societies, it was elderly people that made the decisions for the nation. And so for the old Roman word Senate, I mean, the Roman Senate used to run Rome for, 500 years, in the Roman Republic. And the word Senate in Latin. Yes.
Okay.
So this was the grey-haired people running the show.
Yeah.
Now, when you have kids running the show, kids who think they know everything, because it's just a biological fact, they get it into their head where they know everything, and all their ancestors and everything they stood for was wrong, but the little kids are right. Well, this is when you have a bad revolution, things like the French Revolution or the Russian Revolution. These are and the Cultural Revolution in China. So of course, we want to encourage young people to be actively interested in politics.
Very few are.
Well, that's right. That's right. Well, I think as putting aside people who are involved in politics, as people get older, they do pay more attention to politics.
That's true.
Okay. And not coincidentally, the more they pay attention to politics, the more conservative they get.
Yeah.
Now, the most radical generation, except for this current generation, but the most radical generation of youth were the 1960s.
Oh, okay. Like bra voting and all that kind of stuff.
Well, look, there was endless violence and protests and social movements in the 1960s. Now, all those, if you were, 1968 was the peak. So let's say you were 18 years old in 1968, which means you were born in 1950. So that now makes you 70.
Okay.
So those people were hard left radicals. Okay. Well, 70-year-olds today all around the world, in America, in Australia, and Britain, where all these radicals were, they're all overwhelmingly voting Liberal. So how did they go, or Conservative? So how did they go from being such a radical generation to now being overwhelmingly Conservative voters?
The spectrum changed. Left is now kill babies at the 9th month in the womb. Like that's too far. That's probably what it is. Not that specifically, but would you say the spectrum changed?
Well, I think the people changed. I think they experienced more of life. I think those people that were 18 that were radical leftists who thought Mao Zedong was a fantastic person and the Viet Cong, I think they now have lived a life and they say conservatism is the better future for my children and grandchildren. Now, look, change is inevitable. It's just like time. It's unstoppable. There's always going to be change. But the Conservative says, well, of course, since we're going to have change because we can't stop it, we're going to learn and respect all those generations that came before us, and we're going to learn from their wisdom. Now, the lefty says everything that came before was bad and wrong, and we're going to build a new utopia now.
Very true.
And they get it wrong.
They do, and they want to euthanize the old. Like it's yeah, you're right. On every level, there is only bulldozing that they want to do of the previous generation. You're so right.
Yes, well, look. So, look, what we're witnessing around the world right now is a pretty extraordinary moment with the woke ascendancy. Now, I am hopeful that it's usually darkest before dawn, and that the insanity at some point is going to have to come to an end, and that there will be a revival in conservatism.
God willing.
Now, a decade after the 1960s, which was the most radical generation, we then had the conservative revolution of Reagan and Thatcher, which sort of these things do go in cycles.
Yeah.
So one thing we know for sure, dear, is the next decade is going to be absolutely fascinating to see how it could be all bad, or hopefully it's going to turn out well. But one thing it definitely is going to be, politics is not going to be boring for the next few years. You're
so right. Do you think that the division that exists at the moment, fat versus skinny, gay versus straight, will get worse because of vaccinated versus unvaccinated? Do you feel like that's a category that will become a thing? Well, it's already a thing.
Well, look, I have accepted I'm not going on a plane for the next 5 years. I've just that's okay. Now, of course, I'm horrified by the whole situation, and yes, I think that they're very much heading towards this situation where there's going to be an apartheid state. That's what they want. Yeah. But look, the good news is yesterday I checked the Department of Health's website, and it said only 9% of all of Australians have had one vaccination.
I know, I saw you share that. Yes, I think I shared it too.
Right,
yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I shared yours.
Now, another thing was, in the United States, they were saying, the amazing Dr. Fauci was saying that 42% of Americans had had at least one vaccine. Well, they have now revised that figure. It's only 31%.
Oh, that's quite a vast difference.
Well, that's a big difference. So that means 2 out of 3 Americans haven't taken a vaccine. Now, this is America, which obviously had a lot of COVID last year, okay, and but you still got, and they've had the vaccine shoved down their throat. Everyone's telling them to do it. Even Donald Trump, who I like immensely, he's telling people to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
I think he might be sort of backtracking on that now. But look, so if we've only got, if now I think in the UK and some other countries it's higher. But look, if you can only get, one in 3 Americans, let's say it ends up as 40% of Americans get vaccinated. Well, I know that the orthodox view is from our amazing leaders, our thought leaders, that we should all get vaccinated. But if only, and they want to, they were expecting that 90% of Americans would be vaccinated. And then they would have used that as an opportunity to persecute the final 10%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that's going to be hard to persecute them if it's 60%.
Yeah, people are smarter than they thought, or at least.
Well, let's see. I mean, look, I think every nation is going to have at some point COVID wash over the country. Okay, look.
COVID wash over the country, or actual COVID?
People are going to get this bad flu.
Oh, yeah.
This is what it is. This is a particularly bad version of the flu. Now, people think I'm minimizing it when I say it's a bad flu. Well, I'm sorry. Bad flus are bad,
Yes.
and they, we had, putting aside the Spanish flu, 1957, very bad flu all around the world. Late 1960s, a similar thing. The swine flu in
Europe,
in like about 10 or 15 years ago was bad, wasn't that bad. But these things are random acts of nature. This one might have got out of China.
I was going to say what?
Okay, but it's even if it got out of a Chinese lab, that's because they were experimenting with the influenza virus.
They were, yes.
And just seeing. So
and
it is
HIV and SARS.
Yes. So I think at some point, what's going to happen in Australia is that we're going to have a vest, because unless we want to lock ourselves off for 10 years, and that would be the worst thing we could possibly do to our health, because every year when the flu goes around, people do build up an immunity to it. Now, if we lock ourselves off for 10 years and don't have a COVID season, well, we're going to, at some point, it's going to, if we keep it out for 10 years, it'll come in the 11th year and no one's going to have resistance to these types of diseases.
Well, it's just common knowledge that usually the person with the sickness is the one that should be isolated, not every healthy person around them.
Yes, that makes common sense to me, yes.
Yeah, it's even biblical with leprosy. That's what they used to do. Seal them up, make sure that it is what it is. Mm-hmm. Then when they know, take them to a compound and then leave them there. Yes. Like that's just common sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's quite sad. Let's get into some other questions. Hang on, let me have a look. What did I write? Okay. So do you think that reforming the Liberal Party will people who one could say outright are a little suspect?
Mm-hmm.
I went to a Liberal Party event. I paid $85 for my ticket to the fundraiser. Someone notified the Guardian that I was there, and somehow all of a sudden it became this whole thing. Far right incursion.
Really?
Yeah. You didn't know that? Okay. So. Well, there you go. And I find that really funny. And I'm like, what did I do? I showed up at an event. Really? You know what I mean? That's literally what I did.
Mm.
Yeah. Someone spotted me, and they must have been like, okay, well, we've got to notify someone. At the time, I was so upset, but now I've learned to laugh those things off.
Mm-hmm.
People think that people live for those moments of publicity. I didn't like it. But anyway, how do you get rid of people like that? And because it's full of seedy people. And that's one experience. One.
Well, look, the people that get attracted to politics.
All right, dear. Yeah.
There is with all individuals, there is a spectrum inside them of idealism, where they think they're getting into politics to try to do the best thing for the country and the world.
The gospel.
That's right, yes. And there's other people, and at the other end of the spectrum, they're in politics because they want self-advancement, and they have some need to be famous and to be powerful. So I think within all, let's say Ronald Reagan was the perfect politician in the last 100 years. I mean, and I would put him high on the spectrum of he was in politics because of idealism. But look, inevitably there would have been. He was
already famous.
He was already famous, yes. So what we need to do now, having people who are self-interested and glory hunters is never ever going to stop in politics. But it's just a question of can we have more idealistic type of people in there? Well, I believe that by democratising the Liberal Party, we greatly enhance our chances of that being the case.
Because it is sadly a party that's full of mixed ideology rather than like-minded, right? It's half and half kind of.
Well, look,
At least
it's a broad-based party. It's trying to represent, you know, more than just over half of Australia. So you're going to have lots of different ideas in there, but there should be. And look, I mean, we do want some diversity because.
Oh, of course.
Yes.
No. I don't shy away from that, but like, it's the snakes I'm referring to. Sorry, keep going.
Look, if you read the politics of ancient Rome, okay, and they had absolutely intense politics. Okay, so the snakes are just a part of the, you know, package. They're
on the left as well. I'm sure they exist. Like, I'm sure in the Greens, I mean, they're all snakes, but I'm sure there's the super snakes. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh well, they have their very nasty little internal wars.
Yeah.
But these things will always be the case. But if we have a democratised party, it will minimise it, and the arguments will be about ideas. Not personality. You have to, if you win a party pre-selection because you've had to appeal to 10,000 people, well, you're going to appeal to them, not because you might be good looking or you might have a great career, but because you've got up on the soapbox and you said, look, vote for me because I believe in A, B and C.
Yes.
Okay, and so therefore that will give us a greater chance of having people who are idealists.
Yes, but I guess the problem there is that very few people follow through on the A, B and C. Saying all the right things is enough to a point, but then the people always often feel deceived.
Well, if we had a majority of the parliamentarians, at least in the Liberal Party, who were idealists, and at the moment there's barely any. But if we had a majority, then I think that we would follow through on A, B and C.
Yes.
So this is the big struggle. If we want to turn around Australian politics, and I very much do, then
you think that's a good start.
It's all conversation and it's all going nowhere until you actually reform the one party on the right in this country, which is capable of forming government. Now there are some good parties on the right. I like One Nation. I like the Liberal Democrats. I liked Cory Bernardi's party.
Do you like Ricardo Bosi's party?
I like Ricardo very well. I don't know much about his party.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but it is a pity, and these are people in those parties are pretty much all idealists because they don't join them for power. Now, what would be better, of course, is if we had one big tent on the right. Okay, now I know that David Leyonhjelm at the Liberal Democrats is
yes, I interviewed him. Yeah,
he's not going to agree with everything that the Christian Conservatives are going to agree in.
No,
but they are going to agree on a lot of things. And particularly, they're going to agree about economic matters.
Okay.
Now, 99% of legislation is about money.
Okay.
It's about taxes or regulation. It's once a decade that you get a non-economic issue come up, like euthanasia or something.
Yeah.
So since most of the legislation is of an economic nature, well, it would be good to have a broad-based mass party on the right that was firmly committed to free market economics and balancing the budget and things like that.
Okay, that's a good answer. Can you guys leave the questions to the last 20 minutes? But I'll put it up because you're asking it. But remember that I always let you guys ask questions towards the end. Doing it now is a little bit annoying because I'm on a roll, and I don't want you guys to think that I'm not watching. How do we get rid of lobbyists that influence Liberal Party policy? Okay, thanks, Pissy. Do you know how to give a response to that?
Well, at the moment, what's happened is because so few people have a say in the Liberal Party, those lobbyists, because when you're motivated by money, it does give you gets you a long way in the Liberal Party. You don't have to have much personality or brains or anything else, but if you've got energy, you can go a long way.
Yeah.
The lobbyists have got energy, and so they have got themselves over the decades into a position where they're the ones that control people getting into Parliament. But look, these things are changing. That was particularly the case. That question from our friend was talking about lobbyists in controlling the Liberal Party. Well, that was really most significantly the case in New South Wales, and I believe that era is very much has come to an end. They still have some influence, but it's greatly reduced from what it was, and that's, Tony Abbott played an important role in that when he was the Prime Minister.
Okay. That's good to know. Let's see what else I've written here. What do you think is the issue with conservatives today in the West? So there's as I said to you before, I've sort of given up the title of conservative. I'm still very much that. My head and my heart and all of the way I interact in my own life is all of those. Is that where you are failing to do what you're supposed to do in terms of, you know, conserving and actually realizing that and executing it. It's not really something that's happening. And conservatism now, and I admit that I do this too, but we accept things that we wouldn't have normally accepted because you change with the times. For example, when I was really young, I found transgenderism to be vile. Now, as I grow, I'm like, well, they're people, you know, you can't label them all that way because, you know, they have a heart and blah blah. You know, you grow and you learn, but you know, and now we have people like Caitlyn Jenner and Blair White and that kind of thing. So that is an example of allowing conservatives to move with those movements somewhat. Even though that was their choice, they can do that, you know, but, you know, how do you think conservatism is broken or it just needs to be tweaked? Like, how would you respond to that?
Well, it's clear in the 80s we had Reagan and Thatcher, and we had a very good Pope at the time. Even the Chinese, Deng Xiaoping. You had a good Soviet leader, as far as Soviet leaders go, Mikhail Gorbachev. There's lots of good in the 1980s. The right wing, and in this country we had Bob Hawke as the Prime Minister, who was Labor, but he governed like he was far more right wing than Scott Morrison.
Oh.
These things go in cycles. Now, in the 1980s and really the 1990s, when the right wing was dominant, what did we get as a result of that? We had massive peace and prosperity all around the world.
Isn't that lovely?
That's right. So that is what, and then we had economic growth, we had success. We were able to welcome in new people to this country. We were, you know, politics was boring in the 1990s because
that's what it should be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, then I believe what happened was that era of good feeling up to 2001. And in fact, there was initially.
I was in year 7.
Oh, yeah, right. Initially, things were, people were very united. You know, George Bush had about a 91% approval rating immediately after 9/11. And then they went into Afghanistan to knock over the Taliban government, and that was an extraordinary success for the first 6 weeks because we did knock over that government. And that government had given to al-Qaeda, who plotted that, you know, terrible event.
Yeah.
Now, then what happened was George Bush then, I believe, got sort of some hubris after what initially looked like the success of 9/11, and he thought, and his father had always been very criticised for liberating Kuwait in 1991, but not going through and knocking over Saddam Hussein. Well, George Bush the first had been vindicated on that decision, but conservatives in the 1990s were attacking Bush and saying he was a wimp for not knocking over Saddam. So then W comes along. He's got 9/11. He's got the Afghan thing. Finish off what we meant to do, which is go and get Saddam. Now, then what happened was that obviously turned into hell, and it was, you know, the right wing across the Western world, with few exceptions, was against that war, and it went to hell. Now, I believe what that did is it made the left-wing activists in the West sort of turbo-drive them. It made them think the right are bad and stupid. And it made the right less confident in themselves. And then we're like, okay, no, it's unusual for the Democrats when they get a president for that president to be from the left of their party. Most of their presidents have been from the right of the Democratic Party. Still pretty left-wing, but Obama was from the left of the left-wing party.
Oh, absolutely.
And then, you know, then the whole global warming things just sort of upped and up, and they've wanted to get control of the sort of the media and the bureaucracy and the universities and the social media. So they sort of are at their peak right now, like where the right was in say the late 80s. And look at the state of the world now with the left running the show.
Yeah, it's horrible.
We've got social division, we've got bad street violence, we've got this silly COVID mania, we've got this fiction about global warming, and because we've got weakness in the White House now, we have all the baddies around the world. I didn't step out of line because I thought he was half crazy, and because the Chinese were never going to move on Taiwan when Trump was there, because they thought, we don't know what this guy could do. Now, I don't think they will move on Taiwan, but who knows? I think they'd be pulverised if they did, but they are threatening it, and they are being aggressive to their neighbours because they know that America's weak. One of the important lessons of foreign policy is that weakness is provocative. It's very simple, 3 little words. Weakness is provocative. So when you're weak, Biden, the baddies around the world think, okay, well, I can get away with stuff here.
Absolutely. I don't disagree. You mentioned Scott Morrison earlier, and I think you wrote a lovely article, outlining how lovely he was. Do you want to discuss that and why you think that blew up? Because I think I had it up before. You said the sketch of Morrison's rise reveals that while he has no natural interest in political ideas, he is awesome at the politics of politics. Article did quite well, and it circulated. So what was your, did you just write that because you were feeling frustrated, or like what was where did the like did you take your time with the analysis, or did you have these things already written, or at least already archived? Oh, they'd been festering around in your head.
We know very little about Scott Morrison, okay, which is unusual for a prime minister, because usually a prime minister 3 biographies published by now, at least 1 or 2.
But he was in the background. He always has been. Well,
look, he's the half the article I wrote was a very sort of biographical sketch of Morrison.
Yes.
Just an overview.
Yes.
But I said, look, we hardly have any information. Most opposition leaders in this country have a biography written on them. Tony Abbott had 2 written on him while he was opposition leader, but Bob Hawke had at least 1, and so opposition. It's unusual that we don't have a biography on Morrison. Now, why is that? It's because the guy is not interested in politics. Okay,
he was compelled.
So you
tell me.
He accidentally fell into it.
Yes.
When he was about 35, he was in tourism and other things. He'd never been interested in politics. The opening paragraph in that article goes through the most recent 10 prime ministers.
Yeah.
It says, look, Tony Abbott was the president of the student union. Malcolm Fraser was an MP at 24. It says when they were all in their youth, they were all highly political, a whole lot of them, John Howard, and they were, and there's political fingerprints going back to them being teenagers. And this is why you can write a biography on them. Morrison went to university, gave no interest in politics, left no fingerprints. He just got this job. He got the job really as the administrator, the manager of the New South Wales Liberal Party, which is to run the day-to-day affairs. It doesn't require policy ideas. Scott Morrison has never given any indication that he reads books about politics.
Yes.
He doesn't have any. He can occasionally give a good speech, and I know when he gives a good speech, it's always written by his speechwriters. Tony Abbott, for his important speech, not a good speech. But when Scott Morrison is talking off the cuff, he is a very quick talker, and he's usually got a pretty good line. Okay, unlike poor old Tony Abbott, who the cameras would be in front of him, they'd ask him a question, he'd sort of mumble a bit while he's getting his thoughts together for 3 seconds. Scott Morrison is a quick talker. I'll give him that. But he never indicates that he knows much whatsoever about history or philosophy or economics or any of the deep subjects. And now this is a concern because challenges right now, and we need smart, considered leadership. I feel like Scott Morrison, he was a child actor briefly when he was a teenager. And I feel like he just thinks politics is just like the old saying, show business for ugly people. You know, he likes being on TV. I don't think he's gone and put this country into over $1 trillion worth of debt with no hint of how we're going to repay it. So I don't know.
The only way to just open the economy up.
Yes, well, that's right.
Stop locking down. Sorry.
Yes.
Keep going.
Yes, look, he's someone who accidentally got into the political system. He's definitely a very hard worker. He always has been. His wife, Jenny, has said on more than one occasion, she said, look, I've been with him since we're teenagers. I didn't know what he was going to do in life, but I knew it was going to be big because he doesn't stop. Okay, so he's put that relentless energy, good on him. Australia needs hardworking people. He's put that energy into politics. And, you know, it's hard to become the Prime Minister through that party room. He's had to manoeuvre around Malcolm Turnbull, two pretty impressive political people, you know, people who've been around politics all their lives. And because Scott Morrison dear is obsessed with Game of Thrones and House of Cards.
Oh, how do you know that?
He's told us on more than one occasion.
There you go.
Now, I've tried to watch that crap and I'm not into it. I'd rather go and watch the History Channel or something.
Fair enough.
But he loves that stuff.
Yeah.
I know it's very popular, okay, but that
Game of Thrones is House of Cards.
Yeah. He loves all that stuff, which is all about the manoeuvring. That's the politics of politics.
Yes,
he's not into the sort of the ideas of politics. And look, I think he's going to win the next election.
Well, it's better him than a lefty, I suppose.
Well,
sadly, that's the only way
we've got two bad choices. Yes, look, of course.
Excuse me.
What will happen is, at some point, Scott Morrison this federal government will lose, and then we're going to have a Labor Party government. Now, yes, right now, the Labor Party is the Labor Party at its worst. It seems to be a little bit less crazy than it was under Shorten, who's meant to be from the right of the party. But it's, you know, all their obsession with gender stuff and trans stuff, okay, which, you know, this is why a surprisingly large number of Islamic people are voting Liberal because they cannot stand the woke stuff. They got no time for it.
No, it doesn't make sense to their ideology.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but I think purely based on the polling, we're about a year away from the election, okay? The polling right now says it's close to 50-50. Labor might be ahead by 1 or 2%, okay? But it's very rare for an incumbent government to lose an election. It's only happened 7 times since World War II at a federal level, okay?
Okay.
Normally, the government wins. Now, when the government...
Even when they're failing miserably, like with the whole COVID situation and how it was handled. Well,
if we just base it purely on what the polls tell us.
Sure.
The polls tell us, office, because it has happened 7 times, when a year out from the election, the polls say they're going to lose by a mile. They're going to lose like 60-40.
Yeah.
When Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard lost to Tony Abbott, the polls a year out said it was 60-40. When John Howard lost to Kevin Rudd, it was 60-40 in Rudd's favour. When Bob Hawke defeated Malcolm Fraser, or John Howard defeated Paul Keating, the polls were massive a year out, saying the government is going to get its absolute head kicked into the concrete. Now, as it gets closer to election day, it narrows, but they still lose. The government will get sort of 46, and the one will get 54. So, since it's so close right now, and even though Labor's ahead by a little bit, that tells me ScoMo's going to win. I'm not thrilled about it because...
But you wouldn't want Labor to win at its worst.
Well, that's right. I'm not thrilled about anything.
No.
I mean, here we have, as you said, we've got this Conservative government, which is basically governing, because Scott Morrison's got no political depth. Scott Morrison governs...
That's accurate.
A fraction to the right of the Labor Party. And it's a very left Labor Party.
It is.
So we've got 2 left-wing governments. 2 left It's disturbing, but you know what? Look, it's darkest before dawn, dear, and these things do turn around. Now, sometimes they don't, and countries go to hell. Okay, but I'm confident that the goodness of the average Australian will come through, and we will be able to turn these things around.
Yeah, well, God willing, that's the only thing that I think I get any sort of reconciliation from. I'm going to start putting up questions. Mr. Ruddick, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. Why do I constantly go left? I used to be one myself. That's a fair question, I suppose.
Okay.
Do you have a response for that?
Well, I appreciate the question, Jessie, but look, politics is tough, okay? Now, being an Anzac at Gallipoli in 1915 was tough. I'm not saying join the Liberal Party because you're going to have a great time. I'm saying join the Liberal Party and you're going to meet a lot of people that you don't like, and you're going to meet a lot of people that you don't have a lot of time for, because you can see what other alternative have we got? If we're concerned about the country, we just need enough good people to roll up their sleeves and say, okay, well, there is no other vehicle that's viable that can give us good government other than the Liberal Party. If somebody else can go out there and start a new party and become a party of government, which did happen in Canada in the 1990s, Stephen Harper and other good people, I'm not saying it's impossible. Now, Corey Bernardi was a sitting senator, an impressive guy, scandal-free, largely. And, you know, he started, and he had a good name of the party, the Conservative Party, good name, better than the Liberal Party. And he also had a fair bit of media attention. Okay, I mean, the right-wing media was pretty good to him, the Australian and the Sky. And the left-wing media also gave Corey Bernardi quite a bit of favourable attention because they wanted to cause trouble for the Liberal Party. Okay, now, despite all of that, and maybe it would be very, very different if Malcolm Turnbull had remained the Prime Minister. Maybe Corey Bernardi's party would have been a lot more successful. But for whatever reason, it didn't work, and that has taught us the lesson. Okay, it's a good walk away from it and say that they're conservatives and that I can't be bothered dealing with them. Well, if enough people do that, which is the case right now, people aren't caring, and therefore we end up with this, you know, directionless left of centre government.
Someone, No Lives Matter, asked, why are Conservatives so desperate to get approval from their enemies? That's only some, though. That's the Conservatives that do that. Like, that's because Conservatives have allowed the people hate you and by extension us. But the question's to you, so go ahead, give a response to that.
Well, right now we're living in this era where the left is dominant culturally. Okay, and so people can get hurt badly, financially and reputationally, if you get on the wrong side of the left.
Yeah, I know that too well.
Yes. So people are paranoid. People are living under fear. Now, it does take courageous people, brave host, to sort of keep fighting.
Thanks.
Okay, now, and look, these are the times where it's we find out who's really got the guts. When it's let's hope this is as bad as it gets.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you. We have weak leaders, and you know, this is why I was a big fan of Donald Trump, and still am, because you know Trump he didn't bow. He didn't do what you're saying. He didn't try to get the approval from his enemies. He just told.
He dominated. I love
that. He told us basically what he thought and what he thought was good. And this is why the left hated him so much, because they don't want straight-talking Conservatives. It's been a long time since we've had one in this country. Now, look, even Tony Abbott.
Yeah, he was good.
Well, he was pretty good. He was the best we've had for a long time.
Yes.
But I mean, I remember someone came forward and said that they heard Tony Abbott say.
Who cares if they overheard that? Didn't he have like a missing child or something as well?
Well, yeah. But Tony, rather than come out and say, yeah, I think it is crap.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
He spent years saying, I didn't say it. Okay. Well, you know, Trump came out and said, yeah, I think it's all crap.
Correct.
Okay. So So look, it's been a long, long time. Look, even John Howard, who's obviously, an Olympian god compared to the
Exactly.
the recent prime ministers.
Yeah.
Look, he was, he really had his he was only sort of had his, Pauline Hanson calls it as it is.
Yeah, she does.
She doesn't muck around. And we had Joh Bjelke-Petersen in the 1980s, who was sort of like the Australian version of Trump. I'm not endorsing everything that either of those two people did, but they had in their day a very high amount of popularity because, I think that people do admire it when people have got the guts to speak their mind.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's why there are so many new and up and coming voices in just the commentary scene, not in the in political scenes. But actually, having said that, I think someone like a Ricardo could in the face of Australian politics. So yeah, people admire authenticity, and if people see that you're not authentic, you lose your audience. People can read you through a camera.
Yes,
I reckon. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, guys. Sorry, I didn't mean to ignore your questions. Hang on. Someone, Mr. Ruddick, just saying, is asking, Mr. Ruddick, the LNP took our guns, introduced gay marriage. I did mention gay marriage earlier. I don't think you were watching earlier. Increased immigration, blew out our debt, and changed our national anthem. Why do we need the Labor Party? Oh, okay.
Well, look, the thing is, I can't disagree with most of that. The thing is, look, on the gay marriage thing, I think the Liberal Party did the right thing in that they let the people have a vote. I don't think anybody was a fair vote of the Australian people. Okay, so, I think we should be having more citizenship, more referendums on these questions. Take the power away from the politicians.
They have to be worded properly, though. The way that one was worded was a little funny. Come on.
Okay, well, maybe. But look, the thing is, being Anthony Albanese right now would be a very painful job because you've got this guy called the Prime Minister who's so left-wing on everything and goes along with what the left-wing want all the time, that just has to push him further to the left. So all I can say is repeat myself. If you want to change it, I believe there's only one option. I believe it's the Liberal Party. If Ricardo or others can prove me wrong and they can create a party that wins a majority of seats in the House of Representatives, well, I'll be very, very impressed.
Oh, yes, I completely agree with that. All right. No Lives Matter. All the horrible policy of the past 30 years has been forced upon us under the Liberal flag. How much worse can it get under Labor?
Okay.
Okay.
There's a very no, by James Allen.
Oh, okay, cool.
The academic from Queensland.
Lovely.
He's a top guy.
Top guy, yeah.
He wrote an article saying that we would have been better off under having a Labor government under COVID mania and all the spending. And he made a very good point. He said that if we had a Labor government, and remember, everyone was thinking Shorten was going to win. Let's say Shorten had won, and then the COVID nonsense comes along, and all the government's endless cash to God knows where. And we had the Liberal Party was in opposition, and Shorten was throwing around all the money. The opposition would have made a big song and dance about saying, hey, Australia's spending too much money. We're the highest spenders in the world on a per capita basis. The Liberal Party would have kept a Labor government in check because they would have been, and the Labor Party government would have said, look, we don't want to go too crazy here with the spending because the Liberal Party will accuse us of being economic wreckers.
Oh, interesting.
Right, we have a Liberal Party government acting very unliberal, throwing around all this garbage stimulus money, and the Labor opposition, all they can say is they're not spending enough. Okay, so if we had, definitely in an economic sense, I believe that we would have been better off having a Labor government than a very bad Liberal government
that
like
is so
this.
Interesting. And where do you think would be in debt right now, or at least not to the degree?
Well, in the GFC, there was a lot of government stimulus spending. And in the OECD, Australia's spending under Kevin Rudd was middle of the road. Okay. So we were sort of middle. Okay. I didn't support GFC spending. We should have let those big Wall Street banks crash, and we would have had a deeper recession, but we would have been able to rebuild with strength. But what it was, but getting us, I mean, they would have come back. Wall Street was still going to be there, but the bad banks were going to go bust. By all the stimulus spending, we had a milder recession, but now we have not had strong growth ever since. And now the coronavirus has just, magnified it several times. So, are we in business?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was just trying to remove the comment from the,
okay.
Keep going.
So that's the record we have. When Rudd was there, he sort of didn't want to be seen to be going too crazy with the spending, because he knew the opposition would attack him, and they did attack him. Joe Hockey was the shadow treasurer, I think. So yes, so look, it's dark days right now, but hopefully we can turn it around. We will.
You think we will?
Well, it's
so much money's gone out to the Australian public. Just I don't know. I mean, I hope we will. I like your optimism, but
Well, look, as much as I'm opposed to all the silly government spending, this is the truth. Australia is an enormously wealthy nation, okay? And the money markets are still obviously clearly saying that we can service this $1 trillion debt because so rich as a nation.
In 10 years, 20, 50?
Well, if they were worried that we were going to default on it, then you would be seeing chaos on our financial markets, which you're not seeing. I'm more worried about the United States. Their debt just sort of seems to, it's up to about 30 trillion, I think. They just keep sort of throwing money at it. I don't know how it all gets paid back. Look, after World War II, the Western governments had big debts too. And we overcame that through strong economic growth. And the government encourages inflation. They've got a big debt. The inflation actually erodes the debt artificially. It's not great economics, but that's what happens. That's what they're trying to do here. So we can turn these things around. Look, things were very bad economically in the 1970s in the Western world. And under good leadership of Reagan and Thatcher, they brought in these good free market reforms. Their economies went into a recession at first when they brought in Reaganism and Thatcherism, because it's like a sick person takes some medicine. The medicine doesn't feel great, but then they recovered with strength. These things
that's great.
Through good leadership, and we can only get good leadership through a good Liberal Party.
Well, fair enough. All right, Jessie Bell again. Mr. Ruddick, it wasn't a bloody vote on SSM, same-sex marriage. It was a survey, a serious question. What is the difference at this point between Labor and Liberal?
Well, okay. Well, let's say they're both bad, but Labor's obviously a lot worse.
I would agree with that.
Because you name one Liberal policy that you disagree with, and the Labor Party's policy. So that's what I would say about that.
Okay, cool. PC, what is your view in convincing the Liberal Party in changing the voting criteria? Example, army service, 4 or 5 with 5th generation Australian. 4th or 5th generation.
Well, I'm sorry, I can't accept either of those. So are we suggesting that you should only vote if you've served in the military?
I think that's what he's suggesting as one reason to vote.
Well, that is called a military dictatorship. So we're people in the military, I would like them to be more involved in politics, but I do have some views on reforming the voting system, but okay. And then you've asked the question: should only 4th or 5th generation Australians vote? Well, I don't think so. I mean, because there is lots of people who are very patriotic Australians and they've contributed a lot, and we don't want people having fights over genealogy. Look, I mean, if somebody is an Australian citizen, I mean, they're either a citizen or a 100% citizen.
A lot of my audience are for homogeneity, and I think many of them believe that Australia used to be predominantly what's it called, the Why Australia policy, And that under the Whitlam government, that kind of disappeared, and it got worse under John Howard because there are lots of Chinese buy our homes now, and it's made it harder for people like me. I'm the daughter of immigrants, everyone, to be able to do that. And I see sense in that on some level. I'm not saying I agree with it entirely, but that's where that I think is coming from.
Well, look, I mean, the voting reform that I would be interested in is lifting the voting age to about 25.
Oh, I agree with that.
Yes.
I agree with that. Yes,
Okay.
I also think you should own your own property. Which again, guys, I don't even under what I think. I don't fall under the criteria to vote either. That doesn't mean I can't comment on it and have an opinion on it and do an entire channel on it. But yeah.
But look, about you obviously don't want to mix it up too much and too quickly. Okay, but I mean, look, that little island called England has been the most multicultural little block of land on the planet for about 2,000 years. This is why people in England can be red-headed, blonde-headed, brown-headed, black-headed, everything, every shade of skin, and so they are. That's one of the success of England and the other great Anglo nations, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, is that, you know, mixing things up a bit does create sort of more dynamism. Now, we don't want to with totally exotic cultures, but having a small amount of non-traditional cultures coming in here, in many cases, Colombians, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's true. It's true. You know, having a small amount of over time, I think it's really continuing on what the English have done for a very, very long time, for thousands of years, which is be a big melting pot. And in many ways, look, it's not just ideas. It's just, you know, it's just even a little bit of conflict creates clash and creates creativity. So, if I mean,
would it be an issue to you if this is what they say about Canada, that in 50 years, you know, the settlers that made up the country, I'm not saying that others didn't contribute, I don't know specifically, I do know that it's predominantly white, when I say white I mean European, who made up the country. In 50 years time, it'll be predominantly, there'll be like 30% of the population, and it'll be every other nationality there. I find something sad about that. I know that's considered racist to say that today. I don't think it is, though, because it's like the Mayans are gone. That's sad. The Incas are gone. That's sad. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because I think that's what they're trying to say, maybe. I mean, I'm a bit more tactful, but go ahead.
Well, look, I have spent a lot of time in the last few years reading about the period around federation in this country. Which is a very interesting story. And,
okay.
in fact, but look, we had our first parliament in 1901.
Yes.
Now, the first piece of legislation that we debated, I think it was the second, but it was
one of the first.
Election Act,
okay.
which is the White Australia policy.
Yes.
Okay. And I think it broke a record. It still stands to this day. Of the longest bill that was debated in Australian history. There's 600 pages of Hansard taken up on the debating the White Australia policy. Now, why was it debated for so long? Well, it wasn't really a debate. It was so popular that everybody wanted to get up and have their views on the record to say that this is what we should do.
There was no referendum for it, though, to enter Colombians, Chinese, Spaniards, Greeks, Italians. Sorry,
well, look, there was few voices in the Free Trade Party that said, look, when homogeneity is good, particularly in the infancy of a country,
okay.
and particularly when a country is a continent, and when it's on the doorstep of Asia with, you know, a couple of billion people at that time. So I am, you know, I can see why it was not a bad idea in the very early days
for sure
to have
productivity,
homogeneity, because let's say that one of our major capital cities got became German. Let's say Adelaide had become predominantly German,
Okay.
and there's a lot of Germans in South Australia. Well, then that would have made it.
That's different though, because that's still Western. They would have assimilated fine and then just blended in.
Well, then we had a little thing called World War II, and that could have sort of ripped apart the fabric of the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think for the first few decades, we basically let in people from England and Ireland, okay, and then it slowly opened up to other Europeans, and then that slowly evolved. And look, it wasn't so much Gough Whitlam that there was no instant moment where we said we're going to pretty much sort of encourage people from every part of the world to come in here, but it sort of started with Harold Holt, and then Whitlam, I think, did officially abandon it, but it was really Malcolm Fraser that really that let in people from sort of pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, look, your question was about Canada. I know there's a lot of similarities.
Oh, it wasn't about Canada. I was using that as an example, but go ahead. No, keep going.
Look, I would be surprised if that is the case. I'd like to see some data. I don't know about that.
Okay.
But so
okay, let's see if there's any more questions. We are at the hour mark, and his phone's going crazy. So let me have a look. Multiculturalism destroys diversity. I know from what angle in which you mean that, and yes, that's a valid angle. Okay, this is the one I was going to show. This will be the last question, guys, okay? With 21 years now past, does Mr. Ruddick support a coronial inquiry into the Port Arthur massacre so the families can finally put behind them?
Look, I really don't know much about that issue. Look, I've just seen I've seen some headlines recently about this, but I would be very, very surprised if that massacre was not caused by was shot by a lone gunman. And I think that when you have something very dramatic, whether it's Princess Diana's death or 9/11, that some people will think it's such an extraordinary event that it just can't be as simple as it seemed at face value. But look, from what we know of Martin Bryant, I think he was just a very, very disturbed person, and I think he just went completely nuts. Those things had been happening in Australia and America a lot at that time. And okay, I haven't looked into it, but what are the allegations that
I think they think that it's a false flag and that it's possible that he was set up and that he really is innocent. That's one angle. I haven't done that much research on it. And then there's the other. I think he's suggesting that the families can put it behind them. So maybe just an inquiry in general, just to reopen it, doesn't hurt to double check all the sources.
Well, look, I'd be surprised if its families wanted to relive that whole situation. But
that's true.
I'm talking out of ignorance. I haven't looked into it.
Knew that extra bit there, but yeah. Okay, guys, I am gonna have to leave it. I suggest you look into it, mate. What is your favorite Jean-Claude Van Damme movie?
I'm not much of a movie person. I'm sorry to be so boring.
I don't know. That's okay. I only asked it because it was light. Had some levity to it. Okay, guys. Next week, I'm not sure who I have on my channel. I think I'll have my friend Jimothy on. He's the one that's been making those planned illusion documentaries and interviews with the whistleblowers, so I'll probably have him on next week. Thanks so much for tuning in, and please please share the video. I'm not sure. I'll be doing another on location live next week as well, but it'll be at 8 o'clock. All right, guys, bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you. I'm going to end the broadcast now. Oh, I hate this mouse. And